he's coming from a period where it's understood that you can move from biblical studies into doctrine without, you're not jumping a ditch. You're not jumping a ditch of history. You're not, he doesn't see that. He sees that Scripture was given typically for that purpose of moving people towards saving faith in Christ. And so that does shape the way you view both the tasks of exegesis as well as the tasks of doctrinal formulation. Mastricht's also deeply engaged in the exegetical arguments of others. He's not doing exegesis in isolation. If you look at his work, for example, in the first volume, talking about the nature of theology, you'll find that he's dealing with some Jesuits that we perhaps have never heard of. But they are Jesuits that were deeply engaged on exegetical questions. And Maastricht sees them as worthy of engagement, even though they lived before him within 100 years. So I guess what I would say is you see in him not only an exegetical and pastoral method in that direction, but it's also highly academic. You'll find places that, I'll tell you, as a translator, it's not just wrestling with what he's doing with the Latin. He even has a comment where he'll say, right, okay, Beza has this in his treatment of this particular verse in Matthew. The Ethiopic text has this. And you go, right. Let me go see if I can track down a version of the Ethiopic text. Oh, wait, here's a 19th century German commentary.
Right.
Yay.
And this is one of those things where it's like a footnote in the book that we have, and that was a week of work for you.
Yeah. I would, yes, there's things like that in there where you're trying to, those footnotes are a labor of love.
Yeah, it's important. It's part of the being a scholar and documenting.
Well, I think that's an important point for us as well. So you have the text before you, but you also need to have a realization that Maastricht is engaging his confessional context as well as a philosophical one. He's still making the distinctions. Lutherans say this, the Roman Catholics, or as he would refer to them, the Papists, say this. But his most critical pejoratives are actually what he would call the Socinianizing remonstrance, or the Cartesianizing someone, something along these lines, the Cartesianizing reform. So that usage of these progressive participles gives you a vibrant understanding that he views these as ongoing present day issues in his time.
Wow. Well, volume 1 not only includes that, an introduction to his theological method, but it includes a homiletical aid. So when we're looking at this copy here, people can order that, and it's available right now. Check that out at Westminster Books or RHB, wherever you can find books. You get your copy. A little while ago, they were running a deal, and I hope maybe when Volume 3 comes out, they'll probably spark that deal up again. But it includes a homiletical aid, which describes, his approach to preaching. What were his particular views here, and how is this helpful for us?
So what you're referring to is what he calls the best method of preaching.
Yeah,
and
there we go.
He very, very quickly reminds the reader that it's the best one, not because it's his. That's not why he does it. What you notice if you look through the preface in that work and this bit on the best method of preaching, is he's laying out the fact that he sees in his day practical approaches to people in the pew are declining. You can get a very fine exegetical sermon, but it has nothing. It doesn't change the way that the person in the pew is living, and doesn't strike them in such a way that they would remember it. And the result is, he would say that pastors are stultifying their hearers spiritually. So what you see there, and this is an interesting point. He never knew quite where to put this best method of preaching. In his first edition of the Theoretical Practical Theology, this admonition on preaching was put before the Prolegomena. In the second edition, it was put at the very end of the work. So it's almost like do you put it as the first thing that would-be pastors need to hear? We're aiming at preaching.
Right.
Does it need to be the last thing a seminary graduate hears as well? In all that you've learned, remember you have to preach.
Uh-huh.
So in the selection of where do we put this in these volumes, we chose to put this aspect of the best method of preaching there.
Interesting.
It is a homiletical aid. He will also be the first to tell you that these aspects, exegesis, doctrine, polemics, and practice, you may not use all of those in your sermon at the same time. He doesn't. It would be easy to caricature Mastricht and say, "Oh, this is the 4-part way you do it, and every sermon has to roll out this way." I think he would say it depends on the text you're working with, and you need to understand your hearers, and you need to be careful about how deeply you go into polemical issues. He has a line in this best method of preaching at one point where he says, don't exhume the corpse of controversy. If there's a controversy that's dead and gone, in trying to explain the controversy, you might win some converts.
Right.
So there's a
why
sense
bother?
in which,
yeah,
you're right.
It'd be counterintuitive. Mm-hmm.
There's a sense in which you have to do this sort of method, and you have to be very, very aware of your congregation. What is going to be most useful to them, and what's going to be the most clear to them. So he's just trying to practically admonish pastors, work through your exegesis well, but please remember, if you don't ever actually get around to applying it to your congregants in a way that's going to drive them to faith,
right,
or build them in some aspect of Christian character, you're killing them.